Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a novelist, a writing coach, a manuscript editor, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one-to-one with me, and I'm one-to-one with thriller author John Gilstrap. How you doing, John?
I'm doing great. Good afternoon.
How are you? And thank you very much for doing this. I know you're a busy guy. Um, I see you on the shelves at in Giant, in the airport. You're everywhere. I mean, you're living the dream, and it all goes back to Nathan's Run. So talk about how you got into this whole thing, because you've written like 24 thriller novels, and talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be you.
Well, see, on a day-to-day basis, it's actually pretty boring. But in fact, I just, believe it or not, I just turned in my 28th book, which
Amazing.
is who knew? I've always been a writer. I'm not an athlete, God knows, and I was always, some of my earliest memories were writing stories, telling stories to the page. I was that guy when we would, play Cowboys and Indians or whatever it was. I was always the guy that came up with the story of what we were doing. And, I never thought I'd make a living off of it. I mean, you'd be a fool to try to think that you could make a living in any corner of the entertainment business. So I went to school. My bachelor's degree is in history. My master's degree is in safety engineering. I was a firefighter. I was, and I was always writing in my spare time. And Nathan's Run, which was the fourth book I'd written, for the first time, and I'm a voracious reader too. I think all writers are voracious readers.
Mhm.
All good writers are anyway. And when I finished the manuscript and I read it, a magical thing happened. I actually liked it. And then, it went from there. I went out. Now, these are the old days. This is 1995. So
Mhm.
there was no internet. It was very expensive. Manuscripts had to be FedEx. I don't know what it was, $20 or whatever it was to send this manuscript. And I was rejected by 27 agents. And I finally found an agent who took me on, and she sold it for a whole bunch of money all around the world. And that launched the career. That book came out in 1996, I think.
And you did, if I remember correctly, you actually have in a sense re-released it with a different ending.
Well, yeah. When when I first submitted the manuscript, it had what I found was a very satisfying ending, where the characters have found real stability. And that wasn't the thing in the 90s. So my agent, my editor, both talked me into cutting out the last chapter. We knew that Nathan, we knew that he was going to be okay, but just kind of leave it when the action is done in the story. And I got so many, I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of letters and then emails from people saying, well, what happened to Nathan? What happened next? So when it came time for the book to come back out in print, and in ebook and the whole nine yards, I took that opportunity to put back in the ending I always wanted to have, but at the beginning I didn't have the clout to say no to the publisher. So this was just a much more. I've always thought it was a better ending, quite honestly.
And I mean, I know I certainly don't want to do a spoiler, but I mean, can you give a sense of what the feel is for the ending that you preferred?
The tears, kind of that relief that Nathan. I should tell a little bit about the story. Nathan is a 12-year-old boy who kills. He's in a juvenile detention center. He's an orphan. He's got a really nasty uncle who put him there, and he, when a guard attacks him, he ends up killing the guard and runs away from the juvenile detention center. But all the public sees is a dead guard and a missing kid, and they connect the dots wrong. This kid is a murderer, and he's on the run. So this becomes a boy hunt, I guess, a manhunt for this 12-year-old who's really pretty smart. and we follow him, and he ends up calling into a nasty radio show where she calls herself the bitch, the radio host. That's her radio name. And she's calling for, capital punishment and throw him under the jail and this sort of stuff. So Nathan calls in and tells his side of the story. And then everything kind of changes from there. So the ending, people are trying to kill Nathan. That's what this is. That's the subplot of all of this, is that Nathan has to die in order for something else to happen. So you've got the cops chasing him, and you got bad guys chasing him. Nobody's chasing the bad guys. And it comes to this pretty spectacular conclusion, if I do say so myself. And it just ended there right after the literally last shots are fired. That's where the original ending was. And my ending is like 3 months later. We get to see Nathan back, being happy again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How many words are your novels, generally speaking, the word count?
I think my shortest book, I've done a novella too, but that doesn't count. My shortest book was probably 93,000. The longest was 136.
That's so, I mean, I teach writing classes, and the rule of thumb that I tell them, especially if they're unknown, is about 80,000. And, you, because you are able to get away with a lot longer. Am I right?
Well, I don't know. It's because I'm me per se. I think that, a writer's greatest sin is to squander drama. So if the climax is really running and the story is screaming, the last thing I want to do is get in the way of it and say, oh, well, it's this many words. I think there's always thrillers in particular. I shouldn't put it that way because I don't read a lot of other genres but thrillers and nonfiction. Thrillers in particular are slaves to pacing. So during the editing phase, constantly tightening and tightening and tightening the prose as well as the plot. But by the time when the story ends, it ends, and it doesn't. I guess I just think long form. I do write long. I think less so as time goes on. My prose is getting more concise, but I think that's just experience. That's any writer.
Well, and you're good friends with Jeffrey Deaver, who is also a thriller writer. And I've sat in on one of his classes at a writing conference, and he's a meticulous plotter. I mean, he doesn't even start to write unless he knows exactly, granularly, what's going to happen. Are you similar in your approach?
No, I used to. People told me I should outline, so I outlined in the early books. And what happened was the book never looked anything like the outline. So I've decided it's kind of a waste of time. Mm-hmm. And it also, for me, it sucks out some of the fun of discovering where the story is going to go. So now what happens, I start with a premise, and good guys always win, maybe not completely, but I always want to give the reader a satisfying experience. So I kind of know where the story has to go. And then it's a voyage of discovery. I just start writing.
And do your first drafts run really long, like 150,000 or something like that?
No. And I don't do second drafts, or I do 30 drafts. I'm not sure which, because I start every day rewriting what I wrote the day before.
Interesting.
So, and I write to deadlines. So, you have to make the deadline. So it's like 3 steps forward and 1 step back every day. And actually in the opposite order, because I start with what I wrote the day before. And then as I'm going along, that first of all keeps the story fresh in my head because I don't outline. And if there's something I realize, oh crap, chapter 13, I need to put a second floor on this house in order to make the story work, I will go back and make that change then. And then keep going. So when I finish a book, I try to be finished about 2 weeks before my deadline. And then it's pretty much just a pass, to go over and tighten correct as many typos as I can find and send it in.
How long do you have from beginning to end to meet that deadline? How long are you supposed to take to write your novel?
Well, the old contract, which just ended, I just signed a new one. The old contract was a year, 12 months per book, but I was doing 2 books a year. So, so that turned out to be a 6-month writing schedule, which was really punishing. I didn't like that. So now I've got a contract where the books are coming out, the Jonathan Graves series, which I know we're going to talk about. That series comes out instead of once a year, it's going to come out every 18 months. And I'm starting a second series that is also in 18 months. So a Gilstrap book will be out every 9 months. So now I have 9 months to prime the pump and to keep up. So
do you write for like 8 hours a day?
No, I can't. John, I'm getting old. So, the hardest part of the day is getting up out of the chair and walking straight. It takes a long time to get the oil moving in the in the joints. So I'm good. Well, okay. If I'm on deadline, and I always push the deadline, it's always kind of screaming at the end. I'll be doing 6,000 or 8,000 words a day at the end. So that translates to a lot of time. And
Right.
my focal length will be stuck here because
Right.
I can't. But no, on a general basis, like I did very little. I didn't do any writing today. Where I live out in the country, and they were doing blasting down the street. So I went and watched the blasting for all
cool.
day. I call it research.
Research, sure.
But it's really just, watching things go boom, which is always fun.
Well, you mentioned go ahead.
No, that's it.
You mentioned Jonathan Grave, and this is the first of something like 16 or 17 Jonathan Grave books. No Mercy is your first one, and I'm reading that now. And I mean, God, you're good, and a person can learn a lot about writing by reading you. Talk about Jonathan Grave. How much of him is you?
Well, you're a writer too. You know that every character, good, bad, strange, and lovely and ugly, and they're all me. They all flow from the author. It's all I've got. But Jonathan specifically comes from research I did for a nonfiction book that was called 6 Minutes to Freedom, which is about a Delta Force operation to rescue Kurt Muse out of Modelo Prison in Panama in 1989. And that research, through that research, I met tons of the Special Forces community who are very happy with the book, and I've formed friendships, and they'll answer my questions and answer my phone. So with all that research, I just, once the nonfiction book was done, I thought, this is what do I do with all this? So I created Jonathan Grave as a freelance hostage rescue specialist. And kind of a twist during the research for this, I found out if you're kidnapped, you as an American citizen, if you're kidnapped overseas or taken hostage, however you want to put it, the American intelligence community starts working on your rescue right away. And when it happens, and it happens more than you hear about, normally it's through the local assets. Like if this happens in France, it'll be the French police that will go and do what's necessary, but with support of the American intelligence community. But if it's not in a friendly place, then it's going to be either Army's Delta Force or Navy SEALs that go and do the rescue. Now, when that happens, the rescue is the mission. Everything else, the gathering intel and everything that can come out of it, is secondary to bringing the good, precious cargo is what they call it, bringing the good guy home. That is the mission. If you're kidnapped in the United States, the mission is to make sure the bad guy goes to jail or the bad guy does not win. The mission is not primarily to rescue the hostage.
Why not?
Well, because it's a friend of mine who's on the hostage rescue team calls a hostage taking a homicide in slow motion. That there's really not a lot of expectation. And I'm not saying that they don't try to rescue the hostage. And I'm not saying that they write them off or that they're cynical about this, but careers are not ended when a hostage is killed. Careers end when the bad guy gets away, or if you don't have um, the the warrants and the paperwork, and you can't just listen to somebody because you suspect that they're a bad guy.
Mhm.
So Jonathan doesn't wait for a warrant. Jonathan does do illegal listening. He does, he breaks a lot of laws, but he's always on the side of the angels. And his mission, and it's always more or less domestic, his mission is to rescue the hostage. And if bad guys resist or bad guys try to shoot back, bad guys die. And Jonathan leaves them there. So if you're reading No Mercy, you know that it starts out with a hostage rescue that doesn't go all that smoothly. And the police find these dead bodies in a basement. They don't see the hostage because the hostage is gone. So they're investigating it as a homicide. It is a homicide committed by Jonathan for all the right reasons.
And that's one of the delicious things about your writing is that you've got this moral dimension that the protagonist is wrestling with as well. And so there's a lot of new psychological nuance that's going on there. And now the most I guess your most recent novel is Harm's Way, correct?
Correct. That's the
Now,
most recent Grave book. Yes.
right. And so you've been writing the Grave series for how long?
I think it's 2006 or 7.
Yeah, a long time. So
Yeah.
that means that Jonathan has had to do a lot of changing and growing, correct?
No, Jonathan does. My characters don't age. I made that decision early on. I never thought, nobody thinks the series is going to run this long, but I didn't want to have to deal with that. There's a physicality to everything that he does, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So some of the books build on the other books, but it's not really a series as much as it is episodic. Like the old TV series where you have the same characters that have an entirely different story to tell with each episode. That's kind of what happens with the Grave series.
Okay. And so it's just, he's just in one pickle after another.
Yes. Well, I would say that he causes pickles for other people more than the other way around.
I interviewed Kent Kruger a while back.
Great guy.
Really great guy. And I remember asking him, as a writer, are you working personal stuff out in your writing? And he said yes. And I know from my experience that it's true for me as well. It's same for you?
Not intentionally. I try to. It's hard to talk about this without getting into the woo-woo kind of stuff with creativity, right? But I try to stay out of my head about why certain things are happening. I write, it's very character-centric writing that I do, very tight points of view from the POV characters. And it's really what would they do and how would they handle it? After the fact, if I look at it and maybe I've worked out some things, but that's certainly not, I don't go into this as a therapeutic endeavor.
Right. And talk about your life before you became a novelist. I mean, you did 15 years in fire rescue, things like that. Talk about where your life was and where it was going.
It's really interesting. In retrospect, I was training to be a thriller writer. When I went to college with a bachelor's in history, I wanted to be a writer, but again, nobody can do fiction and make a living. That's what they say. So this was the era of Woodward and Bernstein, and I thought, well, okay, I'll become a journalist. Except I really hated journalism. It's not a.
Why? Why did you hate it?
Well, in my case, I worked for a trade journal, Construction Magazine. Okay. And it was really about sucking up to advertisers and making.
That's not journalism. That's PR.
Well, they called it. I was the managing editor when I was like 23 years old. I still don't know what a managing editor does, but I was it. and they paid me $8,000 a year. So, you do what you're told.
Yeah.
But I knew I didn't like that. And my boss was a drunk. It was, it was a
Mm.
miserable experience.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, I got involved with the volunteer fire service with a station that ran 14,000 calls a year. I mean, volunteers running 14,000 calls a year. And that was life changing. And first of all, you get to play with the sirens and, running burning buildings. You walk, I was 22, 23 years old, walking into the worst moments in people's lives, and they expect me to be in charge. And it was marvelous, and you do
Was
good
it
work.
was it an adrenaline thing?
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, well, there's adrenaline, and then there's the you got to figure out how to do this. A quick story. I rolled up on a apartment fire. I was not in charge, thank God. There's fire blowing out everywhere, and people are hanging out of the windows and screaming for help. And we were the first
Mhm.
arriving engine company.
Mm.
And the officer gets out and he puts his hands on his hips. He was a cigar chewer. Takes a cigar out, puts his hands on his hips, and says, "Well, shit, we are 911." So,
That's a
you got to
quotable
figure out,
quote.
you're the best you're going to get. And so there's an adrenaline rush to it in the danger and the heat and, all that kind of stuff. But there's also, it's really important, and decisions you make quickly, if they're not the right ones, then they often are not the right ones. You got to make it the right one really fast by, changing what you're doing. So that I found to be very exciting. And then in the process, I found out there's a thing called a safety engineer. And I went to school at University of Southern California. I was living in Northern Virginia at the time, and they had a school at Crystal City, which was the Institute of Safety and Systems Management, I think. So I went into the degree program, and I met a guy that hired me to be the head of the safety department for an explosives manufacturer. So I got to make explosives and blow up explosives and design rocket motors. I was a rocket scientist. So, and in the meantime, I was doing this writing on the side. So, stuff just it evolved, and a lot of that stuff, all of that, from the camaraderie, the firehouse camaraderie, to walking into dangerous situations, finding the humor in dangerous situations, and blowing stuff up. That's all in the books.
There's the whole left brain thing, which is the writing, and then there's right brain, which is the creative side, and sort of a more of an emotional side as well. And when you're in these life and death situations, how does one handle the emotions, the intense emotions of a situation like that?
You push them away because they have no place. This is their bad day, and I'm not going to mix up my bad day for their bad day.
Mhm.
And it's all about the operation. It's about bringing order to chaos, and the fact that the chaos involves people. And I'm not a monster, right? I mean, none of these people are monsters. They're in this for all the right reasons, but you have to function, and there are certain things you have to push away.
Is that learned
Um,
or instinctive?
I think it's learned through the modeling of the senior folks who were doing it. There are some folks, and rookies. Everybody's a rookie at one point, and you can see them start to lock up, and that's where you put your hand on the shoulder and say, "Okay, I got this," and you don't chastise or anything like that. But somebody at that point is now doing my job. It's not. It's a very subtle form of chastisement that never evolves into a tongue lashing, but you know that he's carrying that thing, or he's helping he's taking care of that ugly patient, who's bleeding, because I couldn't or chose not to, and you got a job to do. So you do the job.
But then there's the decompression time where you're now away from the scene, and there's an opportunity to process that emotionally. But I would imagine that there are a lot of people who don't. They turn to alcohol or other ways to numb the emotions. And again, I'm probably getting into uncomfortable areas for you, maybe not. But how does one deal with that? Do you have any kind of insights?
Well, I think that, if there, I'm in my 60s now, and I haven't ridden a fire truck in 30 years. Uh, so there are some incidents that come back, the ones that are the ones that have been pushed far enough aside, and either a giant mistake I made, or whatever the case may be, and it comes back, and I handle it now by, it's done. I can't
change it.
you just can't change it. And I did my best. There's never a time I can think of that I didn't do my best, even when stuff went wrong. So, you find that place. Joy, my wife, tells me, she didn't reveal this until quite some time after I left the fire service. She always knew when we had an agreement that we had a little kid, and, this is my choice, not hers. So it was fair game to bring the funny stories and such, the firehouse stuff, back home and talk about it, or the calls that were, if I delivered a baby, we could talk about that. But the scary stuff, or the really awful stuff, I didn't bring home, because why would I? It's kind of a burden. But she says she always knew, because I come home and take a long shower.
Interesting.
And she called it my psychological scrub. I was not aware that I did that.
I was going to ask, were you aware? And that's
No.
How did you? What was your reaction when she made that observation?
I think it's kind of I guess emotional. It's an odd balance for any emergency responder, because I wasn't getting paid for it, so that's kind of an extra layer of stuff. And I had a job. There came a point I owned my own company when I was doing this, so you have other responsibilities. So the balance is, she doesn't want to put me in a position where I feel bad about her knowing stuff that I was trying to keep from her, so
Yeah.
it just,
yeah. Okay. I'd like to talk about Hollywood. You've got something to talk about, a sharp turn, right? But I mean, I think this is every writer's dream, is, and often we get feedback, oh, this is so good, you should, it should be a movie or a TV series. But in your case, it's either been that, or it's almost been that. Talk about Hollywood and how fickle Hollywood can be, and what your experience has been.
Hollywood has perfected the art of lying to your face. It doesn't bother anybody, because it's presumed that everybody is lying to everybody all the time.
That's kind of cynical, though. Isn't it?
It is. Well, it's reality. It's
okay.
I was writing a Young Men in Fire. It was an adaptation of a Norman MacLean book. I was working out of the bungalows on the Warner Brothers lot, and there was an empty office, and I was sitting there, and I was writing the screenplay in the empty office, and I would hear, I don't know, it was every Tuesday, whatever the day was, the screenwriters would come in to make their pitches. I never heard the pitches, because I was in a different office, but the lobby was right outside my office door. Routinely, these folks would come out. Wow, we're so glad you came by here. They stand by your phone. We're going to call your agent. We're going to make a big movie here. The folks would leave, and the producers would turn to each other and say, "Was that the worst piece of shit you've ever read, or what?"
Oh, man.
And because it's so much easier to send somebody out with hope than it is to tell them no to their face. And, it's a special breed of cowardice. And it's a business model that makes no sense. I've made a lot of money from Hollywood. I've sold 2 of my books outright. I've optioned 2 more. I've worked on 4 screenplays for them. And it's been good to me. The money's good, and it's fast. The check's clear.
Because you can make money and not ever have anything come to the screen, right?
Oh, for 6 Minutes to Freedom, the nonfiction book, when I sold the option for that, I attached myself as a screenwriter, because I wanted to get back into the union. I wanted, they got great health care, and you get screeners, right? So, as a screenwriter, there's a quote, and it's usually what you got paid for the last screenplay. And so each quote is a little higher than the others. And I had done 4 of these. So I attached myself when the producers got to that stage where they're going to go to the screenplay. They had to hire me because that was the deal. These guys paid me my quote not to write the screenplay. So, I mean, literally the easiest money ever made, right?
Right.
But it was seriously, and somehow this makes sense in the business model. And I go back in a heartbeat, but it's a crazy world.
Well, and you don't, I mean, what I'm discovering as well is, sure, I'd love to have my books made into movies, but I'm not putting my hopes there.
No.
My job is to write a good book. And if somebody in Hollywood goes, yeah, that'd be great, wonderful. But I'm not going to hold my breath. And I'm getting the sense that that's sort of your approach as well.
It is. And, if somebody wants to, nobody's optioned the Grave books yet. So if you're a producer out there, they're available. Be happy to deal with you. Give you my agent's name.
Well, and I mean, there's just so much stuff coming out. And I mean, with these streaming services now, I mean, the maw is huge. There's a need for all kinds of stories. So it's sort of like publishing. I mean, I don't know exactly what the figure is, but it's like, tens of thousands of books a day are being published. It's just crazy. And there are only about 4 big publishers. And then you've got a lot of self-publishing, a lot of indie publishers. So I guess my question to another segue is, I'm assuming that there are going to be a lot of people watching this who are wannabe thriller writers. And they've got a great idea, but they don't necessarily have a clue about what they're doing. What is, based on your experience and the teaching that you've done and the contacts that you've had with people who want to write, what in your opinion is the biggest misunderstanding that wannabe writers have about writing and publishing?
Well, on the writing side, I think people think it's a lot easier than it actually is. And it's writing. There are 2 parts to writing. And one of them, I believe, and I've had a lot of discussions with people who vehemently disagree with me. Most of those are selling books about writing. I think there's a talent element to writing. You either observe people and hear dialogue and understand how characters react with each other, or you don't. I think you can teach the mechanics of writing. You can't teach the soul of writing. That's what
do you mean? What's that? What's the soul?
With go back to Nathan's Run. I mean, Nathan's Run it's a small story. It takes place over a few days, but it's fraught with emotion. I hear this about grown men saying you're crying on the subway and such, and that's a great compliment, by the way. And that's built in retrospect. This, and again, I don't think about this at the time when I'm doing it. It's about word choice and the physical appearance on the page. I'll finish the sentence here in a second. I write in third person, very close in third person, which means the narrative of a point of view character is written in that character's voice. So Nathan's chapters are much different, and there's an innocence to them that you don't find in the Hitman's chapter, which is much harsher. And the fact that those 2 are so widely divergent put the reader in a position of really rooting for the good guy and really wanting the bad guy to go away. So I think if that can be learned, it's learned through reading and reading and reading and reading. When I was in high school, and I read The Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth, which is about the assassination of Charles de Gaulle, which is interesting because Charles de Gaulle was not assassinated. So we know that the hitman, the Jackal, is going to fail from the very beginning. It was such a compelling book, and it's the first time that I saw how the author did it. I saw the structure between the space breaks and the chapters, and which characters he chose to highlight and which ones he didn't. I saw the skeleton of the thriller. It took me years to figure out how to put the skin on the thing, but I understood the structure of what he was doing. I see far too often people saying, you got to have, I don't even know the terms, the inciting point or whatever the hell it is, and it's got to happen by page 3. And if done, that's no. Tell the damn story. Tell the story as quickly as you can. Start on action. People buy a book when they read the first page, so have an interesting first page. But I think a lot of folks, wannabe writers, want it to be easy, and they want to get a trophy for stuff that's not ready for prime time.
They get impatient. They get impatient,
and then they default to self-publishing, which floods the market. There's good self-published stuff out there, but it's completely drowned by the dreck that's out there. That because you finish it, type up a manuscript, you can have it up on Amazon in a couple hours. I guess I've never done it. I don't know.
You can, yeah.
Okay. So I think that's the biggest problem. That and it's not about the fame and fortune, right? It's really about a good story, well told, and the feeling you get after going on that great pretend is what I call it. I think when you read a good book, however you define a good book, it becomes that motion picture in your head, and the reality of what you're reading is more vivid than the chair you're sitting in. That's what writing is for me, but in reverse. Not every day, but on the good days, that's what it's like. And that's a drug, man. That's really a nice way.
Are you also discovering that people don't understand that there's a marketing component? I mean, even you as self-published, or not self-published, traditionally published, you still have to carry a big load in terms of marketing, correct?
Yes, and less of a load as you sell more, right? So once you become a proven commodity at a publisher, they start investing more in your marketing. But
then you don't really need it, so it's not fair.
No, I think you always need it. There's always somebody nipping at your heels, right? And but when I started with Kensington as my publisher now, and has been through the whole grave, well, 6 Minutes to Freedom. So that came out in 2006. So I wrote it. Went with them in 2004. And early on, Nathan's Run, at all costs, the first 2 books made a lot of money, and then there was kind of a slump, and I won't get into all of that. But I came to Kensington as an unproven commodity, and the advances were much smaller and all that. But that's okay, because I was going to publish a book, and I ended up spending probably $15,000-$20,000 on my own marketing, and that was through Facebook. And I don't even know what we did anymore. So long ago, and everything has changed. But that investing in my own small business to make things work. And then, sales happened, and as I had to spend less than that because the publisher was spending more than that. Now my marketing is really, this sort of thing, and, the occasional book signings. I don't do book tours. I think those are a waste of time and money. But it's, particularly as a beginner, you've got to go out and make those sales, and be aggressive about it. If you're an introvert, fine, go out and sleep all day tomorrow, but today is marketing day, and you figure out how to do it. If I'm at a book signing, pre-COVID, right? So you go to a Barnes and Noble or whatever it is. I'm a bigger name than some, but I'm nowhere near as big a name as others. And folks just don't come out to these things anymore.
Right.
So you're sitting at this table surrounded by your own books. Right. And so I'll take either bookmarks or business cards, and I walk around, and I say, "Excuse me, I know I don't mean to be, I'm that guy that's supposed to be up at the table here. I don't mean to ruin your day. This is me. And if you're interested, I'd love to sign a book." And 100% of the time, as soon as you walk away, they pull out their phone and they Google you to find out who you are and what you've done. Uh-huh. And then, a good percentage, not double digit, but a good number of people then come by and they want to talk about the book, and then they buy the book. So it's not an aggressive marketing, but you're there anyway. So,
are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Oh,
Or
I'm an extrovert with 3 exclamation points.
that's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Yeah.
But so that means it's easier for you.
I guess it is. I mean, I'm an extrovert to the, and my wife is not.
Same
So
here.
I go to a conference. We've met at conferences and such. You know, I close the bar. I am just completely jazzed, and then I can't go to sleep. I'm still jazzed, and I actually, the definition of an extrovert, as I understand it, is I draw energy by being around people, and that's me.
Right. Yeah. And we've closed the bar a couple of
Yes,
times
we.
at a few conferences. And that's, I really want to segue. Uh, I didn't really tease it at the beginning of our conversation, but I did in the promo because over time in the conversations that we've had, we've discovered that we probably disagree on just about everything,
Pretty
at least,
much.
everything political, I
Hmm.
suppose. But the thing that impresses me is that we're able to do that civilly. And I'm glad for that because we're now living in such a polarized time that people can't even agree on what the facts are.
Right.
Consequently, there isn't an opportunity to really build bridges. I mean, I was a journalist for 45 years. My kids didn't know how I voted. I was a registered independent. Um, and and so my job as a journalist is always to seek out other opinions. You know, it's okay to have an opinion as a journalist. Your job is to inform, not persuade.
Hmm.
And so the job was to build bridges, to find common ground, and so on. We're way beyond that now. I mean, I used to be an editor at CNN. There are anchors at CNN who are saying stuff I never would have let on the air. And so journalism is changing, conversations are changing, relationships are fizzling, families are falling apart because of the intense polarization. So let's talk a little bit about where we are politically in this country. And let me start the conversation this way. Based on our relationship, how is it that we're able to have conversations about stuff we disagree about?
Because in speaking with you, and we've seen it devolve actually at these conferences where third parties kind of come in and try to derail what's going on.
Yeah.
You ask, I think it matters to you when we're having these conversations how I came at such a stupid conclusion, you know, and it's vice versa. You know,
Exactly.
we all live with the same data set, and somehow we come up with different conclusions. And to me, the part about respecting other people's opinions is, you know, if pick a topic, whatever the topic is, if you come down an entirely different place, and I know that you're smart, then I'm not seeing something, you know. So tell me what I'm missing, and that's what you do too. And they've been spirited discussions. I don't think we've ever yelled at each other.
No,
Um,
and even with alcohol involved,
right, right.
anything can go wrong there.
So it's not a. I think it's a shame where things have devolved to within my own family, not my immediate family, the one that I live with and raised, but the extended family are on the other side of the political spectrum from me, and they walk away. I mean, one in particular will kind of throw out a political bomb, and then if you start to answer back, they just walk away.
Yeah,
So, well, what was the point of that? You know, if
exactly.
I would be happy to, I'll talk to anybody about anything. And quite honestly, John, there more than a few times in having those kinds of discussions, if I don't change my mind, at least I understand the other side. You know,
Yeah.
it's not crazy. You know, they're not okay. I get it. I get it. You're coming at it this way, and you
Okay.
know, if you throw in religion and that kind of stuff, particularly, those roads will never actually meet, but they can come close.
Okay. Well, here's an example. You you're a weapons expert,
I
and I
am.
mean, Jonathan Grave shoots people, and you've said he's on the side of the angels, and it's true that he is. I've read, I'm familiar with the series. But here, let me ask this. Um, and I don't think you and I have ever had a conversation about weaponry, gun control, stuff like that. Where do you come down on gun control? Or, are you dead set against it in all cases?
All cases. You can never argue from the absolutes, right? So we'll take it to the middle. The Second Amendment is a Second Amendment, and I'm a literalist. I think that the right shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment, all the Bill of Rights in general, lays out the natural rights of human beings by virtue of living. They're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. So what the Bill of Rights says is the government can't stop free speech. They can't disarm the public. They can't house troops in your home. They can't search your home without a warrant. It doesn't grant any rights. All it does is it limits the government's ability to do anything. So it's a long way of saying that I err on the side of the citizenry being armed. I live in West Virginia. I'm talking to you right now from West by God, Virginia. And this is a constitutional carry state, which means that anybody, and many are, anybody who's not legally prohibited from carrying a gun, felon, underage, that sort of thing, can. They don't need a permit. And we don't have a lot of homicides here. I'm not saying there's no causality, correlation is not causality. But I live in Berkeley County, which is the same footprint as Fairfax County. And I don't know if you're listening to this elsewhere, it's about 400 square miles of land, both here and in Fairfax, where I came from. Fairfax County has 1.2 million people. Berkeley County has 110,000 people. So as it's an entirely different way of life here where there's the constitutional carry. Correlation and causality are not necessarily the same thing.
But help me understand why people need assault weapons, AR-15s. Why?
Well, an assault weapon, pull up that picture.
Okay. All right.
Okay. That is, I believe, I know it's a Heckler & Koch. I think it's the HK-417, which is the gun that Boxers carries, one of my characters. That's not a machine gun. It fires the same bullet as my deer rifle downstairs, and you get one blast with every trigger pull. Mm-hmm. So what part of that do we ban? What happens is you got the detachable box magazine, which is the thing that's below my hands there, hanging out of the bottom. Mm-hmm. That looks like a 20-round magazine, maybe 30. So we can outlaw how many bullets we put in a magazine. Okay, make it 10. What's a good number? Because all you have to do is change out the box for the next set of bullets. It is, again, it's not a machine gun. We outlaw, you see at the very top at the end of the barrel, mm-hmm. That's it's a diffuse. I call it a diffuser, some call it a muzzle brake. It has nothing to do with the firearm at all. All it does is divert the flash and divert the noise of the gunshot, so it's not as punishing for the shooter. Where my watch hand is, my left hand, mm-hmm. That's called a barrel shroud. All it does is keep you from burning your hand mm-hmm. on the barrel. So anything that has the diffuser, a barrel shroud, and a detachable box magazine in California is an assault rifle. Mm-hmm. And that's why they ban it. They're not changing. It doesn't ban the ammunition because people use it all the time for deer and whatever it is they're going to shoot. The other one, very similar to that, and the AR-15, it fires a souped up 22. It's a 223, which is, it's not like 22 long rifle, but it's just not a huge bullet. It's a fast bullet, but so we don't have an honest discussion about gun control because people on the other side of the issue, I don't write gun porn, but I read gun porn. So you roll your eyes when you hear these politicians talking about the reasons to ban an assault rifle, which isn't really a thing. It's defined actually as a machine gun with certain attributes.
But there are weapons. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but there are weapons where you can, hold the trigger down and it'll shoot,
No.
a
Well, yes, they're there, and those have
multiple
been
rounds a
illegal.
second, multiple
Those have
rounds
been
a
illegal
second.
since 1938, I think. You absolutely cannot. You can't have a sawed-off shotgun. You can't have a silencer. You can't have a machine gun. Those laws are already there.
Are you okay with those laws?
Um, I guess. I mean, a machine gun is a weapon of war. And what makes it a weapon of war is only the first shot is aimed. The recoil on a machine gun makes it, when you just rip it out, the recoil sends the bullets everywhere. And in war, that's great because it's only the enemy that's down there, and you throw all that lead down to keep their heads down so that you can move. Okay. I don't think that there is, as far as I'm concerned, I would not have a use for a fully automatic weapon. And again, they've been, for my lifetime and beyond, they've always been illegal. Now you can buy one, but you have to, it costs you $200, and that goes to the government. The ATF will let you buy a fully automatic weapon that's otherwise illegal if you pay a $200 fee and you go through a background check. Now, do we like these things or don't we? Do we going to ban these things or aren't we? And so there's the mixed messaging that, so rich people who can afford a $200 tax stamp and also to buy an insanely expensive firearm, I mean, those are thousands of dollars. But if you're rich, you can have one. If you're poor, you can't. But the gun you saw there, which is an AR platform is what it's called, but it's not an AR-15, just gun porn, right? That's just a semi-automatic single fire. If you pull the trigger, you get one bullet firearm. There are other firearms that do exactly the same thing with exactly the same bullet, using exactly a different. Yeah, it has to be. I forget there have to be two characteristics in order for it to be banned in Maryland and California and other places. The exact same firepower, but because it doesn't look like that, it's legal.
Mm-hmm. Let's see if there is something we can agree on. Killing elementary school children is a bad thing. Yeah, bad.
Yes, that's bad.
How do we stop that?
Don't shoot at them.
Well,
Get rid of.
great, but people do that. And is there
Um,
anything that we can do from a public policy standpoint, a mental health standpoint? I mean, what can be done to stop that?
This is going to sound really flippant, and I guess it is, but it's the most direct way to get there. Shoot back. If we're going to accept
those fifth grade, those kids
you're not
didn't have guns.
No, and nor should they. However, I've gone through dozens, if not hundreds, of hours of training, and if I'm a teacher, shouldn't I be allowed? I've background checks out the wazoo. I've had a top secret clearance. I've got global entry. I've got concealed carry permits for 40 states. I have all of this background. Shouldn't I be able to carry a gun? If we're going to accept that the bad guys are coming in at some point, why shouldn't I be able to shoot back?
Okay. What about mental health? How are we doing as a country in terms of addressing mental health issues and allowing people who have mental issues to have guns?
Well, crazy is crazy, right? So we got a few that are out there. I don't know why the world does seem crazier than it used to, and I blame it on the anger, which then I lay it at the feet of parenting, and I lay it at the feet of politicians who foment anger, and I lay it at the feet of the media who foment anger because that's what gets you the clicks. Yeah. So the American machine is driven by anger, and we can't be surprised that angry people crack after a while. right? So, and in my circumstance, because I'm a gun guy, right? And I don't know how to say this. Let's say it's not unusual for me to be carrying a firearm when I'm out in public. And the idea is not because I think I'm going to get in a fight. I mean, if I thought I was going to get in a fight, I'd stay home. But if something happens, they say run, hide, and fight in that order. Okay, run. That's a really good one. That's like my best thing ever is to run away. Hide means wait your turn for the bad guy to find you. And ultimately, it's ended with a fight that will come more times than not. I guess it comes from the police, unless you got 400 police outside an elementary school listening to kids getting killed.
Yeah, exactly. Uvalde, right?
That my head will explode if I think about that one too much. And they were arresting parents who were trying to get in there and stop the guy.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of crazy. So, if as a society, we really believe that we're becoming much more violent and the violence is bad, let's teach counter violence.
Okay. I don't disagree with that at all. So along comes Donald Trump, who really knows how to stir the anger pot. Where do you come down there?
We'll see what happens with Donald Trump. He's kind of he says things in a very fire department kind of way.
What do you mean?
He's blunt. There's not a lot of subtext. There's often not a lot of reality either. But he's a charismatic guy.
Yeah.
And in an era where charisma is really hard to find. I say in politics, I do a radio show in the mornings. That's local politics. I'm so tired of hearing political speech. I mean, this is West Virginia. This is hardcore right of right. I think there are 3 Democrats in the West Virginia House, in West Virginia Senate. That's it, 3. And the things people campaign on are about how they've gotten their feelings hurt, or the other side isn't being honest, or the other side, the whole pronoun thing and all that. Fine. We'll stipulate that that's a bad thing. What are you going to do? That's what I ask on the radio. What are you going to do? Well, we're going to pull the parties together and we're going to have discussions and we're going to, no. Okay. That's great. That's great. So you got the parties in a room. What are you going to tell them to do? Well, it's a little early to go through. Nobody will get tied down. The first time I see a candidate who goes back to the shining city on the hill, who has a positive, unifying message that we can get past this. This is how we're going to get past it. And this is where we're going to go. I'm voting for it. It's or her. It's just, but it's not out there. We don't value statesmanship anymore at all. And, it's on the other side of it is, President Kamala Harris or President Joe Biden, or 340 million people. Is that what we got in the United States now? And this is what we end up with is our binary choice. How can that possibly be true?
Mm-hmm. So I'm getting the impression that you're not a Trump fan.
I am. I'm a Trump skeptic. I think, frankly, if he would have shut his mouth in his first term, I think he did a lot of good. I think the condition of the country was fine, and he especially did it against the headwinds of the media onslaught, which is unifying the right. The whole all this court stuff and
oh man, he's making money. He's making money off this.
Well, and he's earning by depends on which poll you want to read. He's pulling a lot of the independents in and the minorities and such, because people have a sense of what's fair and what's not. Yeah, these are not the interesting times that I was hoping for, but it is what it is.
Well, you and I could go on, and I'm hoping we'll close more bars in the future. Tell me what you're working on now.
I have started a new series. The first book is due in July, which unfortunately is a lot closer than it feels like.
That's going to change.
Yeah.
How different is this from Jonathan Graves?
This is an offshoot. I don't know how far you've gotten in the other book. Irene Rivers is the director of the FBI in the Grave books. And the Tony Darman has been president of the United States since 2005 or 6, whenever I wrote the book, right? and he's corrupt. He's just as bad a president, which is kind of necessary because it gives Jonathan something to do.
Right.
Well, Irene in Zero Sum, which is the book comes out in August. Irene takes him down and takes her career with her. So now she has her own series, and she has moved her family. She's got her pension. She's doing okay. And she just wants to move to, wait for it, West Virginia.
You write what you know.
To kind of live a quiet life, just be done and not done with the FBI, done with the politics and all of that. But of course, the rest of the world doesn't let that happen. So
now, you're a fairly macho guy, but now your protagonist in this new series is a woman. So how do you do that?
That question comes up a lot. And actually, I wrote a trilogy, the Victoria Emerson trilogy, just finished last year. Actually, White Smoke, the third of it just came out in paperback in December. And she is also, Victoria, she's also a female character. You know what? I don't think of it that way. I don't write about her femaleness. My books don't go into the bedroom anyway. It's not something I write. So I write about strong people, loving parents, doing the right thing the right way, and meeting challenges. It's not a, like I said, I don't write about the womanness of it.
And do you get, I don't know, criticism for how you handle with them?
No, I get praise.
Just the other way around.
Yeah, right. Praise for writing strong female characters.
Okay.
And I think part of it is, truthfully, I don't. I've been surrounded by strong women my whole life. It's not I've never believed. In fact, I remember watching, I think it was a Mannix episode when I was a kid, and asking my mom, because they were running, and the women running in their high heels, they always twisted their ankle and then had to be helped. I remember asking my mom what was wrong. The honest question: what was wrong with women's ankles? Why did they always twist them? So I think it's just a matter of how you approach the story, and and the characters. And again, I write close in third person point of view, so we're always Irene.
When you say close in, that means it's not omniscient. It's
right.
A limited POV, correct?
Yes. If the character can't see it and smell it, neither can the reader.
Right.
So,
okay.
And from that point of view, I just don't think there's a lot of difference.
Okay. Anything else you want to add that I didn't ask about that you'd like to cover?
No, aren't you going to talk about that stupid, ridiculous thing or whatever it is that we can we can disagree on? No.
Well, I think we probably disagree on some gun control stuff, but and to a certain extent, Trump. I'd have to rack my brain to think of anything he's ever done that's good. But and he's just gotten crazier. Talk about crazy.
Well, let's say, yeah, crazy. Whether it's we can argue if it's a capital C or a lowercase c. But I'll stipulate the crazy.
It's a capital N as in narcissist. But
okay, I'll agree with that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's end before it goes south.
Before we screw it up.
John Gilstrap, it's wonderful to talk to you. I'm looking for where am I going to see you this year on the circuit?
I know I'm going to be at BoucherCon in Nashville. I might be at Thriller Fest in New York. I don't know yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to be at Thriller Fest. I will be at Killer Nashville and BoucherCon.
Oh, and C3.
Good. I'll see you there too. Austin Camacho's. Wonderful. To be continued, sir.
All right.